back with another edition of the Commitment Issues podcast. Rob, we've been away for seemingly weeks. Welcome back. How good do you feel to be sitting down recording once again?
It's amazing. I'd forgotten that we had this podcast. It's been 3 long weeks. It seems like you and I have traveled across the country and back again since then. We did the math, didn't we? It's well over 2,000 miles in the last couple of weeks.
No. We were not 2,000. We were each over 6,000, and I believe a combined, after my recent trip to Florida and back, I think we have a combined over 15,000 miles in the last 3 weeks. So that's a lot of traveling. We could have gone around the world. Instead, we just went to a bunch of football events.
Yeah. I could have seen the pyramids and the Taj Mahal and everything else. Instead, I saw Tua Tagovailoa throw passes in California.
All right, so we'll jump right into it now that we're back. Quick reminder, you can reach out to us at Rivals Podcast on Twitter, rivalspodcast@yahoo.com. So if you want us to talk about something you haven't heard from us, feel free to bother us. And, of course, leave us a review on iTunes and subscribe there. We'll get back to a weekly schedule going forward. You mentioned Tua Tagovailoa, or however we say his name. He's a big-time quarterback from Hawaii. A lot of SEC schools are interested in. But since we've been gone, the quarterback dominoes have really started to fall. Let's kind of go through the list. Jake Fromm flipped from Alabama to Georgia, which is something that we had speculated on a few episodes ago. That's a big-time addition for them. It was especially interesting considering they had just offered Davis Mills. I'm wondering, from your outside perspective, do you think when they offered Mills, it kind of put the pressure on Fromm to jump on board?
Yeah, I think that definitely will motivate somebody. These quarterbacks don't want to be the other guy in a class ever, especially not in your hometown school. So maybe he was thinking about it. We knew he was thinking about making the commitment switch, and that probably pushed him in that direction to do it sooner than later, which could end up being a good thing for Alabama. If you're going to have a guy like this change his mind, you want it to happen earlier the better, right? You don't want to be stuck at the 11th hour. So maybe this will work in Alabama's favor in some weird way.
Okay, so when we talk about Fromm as a player, I'm kind of hesitant to compare him to anybody off the top of my head. He's a big kid weight wise. I think he's close to 215. He's about 6'1". I know there's been some debate over his height, as he claims to be 6'3", but our producer Nick Kruger famously did an interview with him where he was taller than him, and that was back in the fall. And Nick, is about 6 feet tall. So 6'1", very athletic, put up huge numbers last year in the state of Georgia. A guy I've always really liked. Now, the last Georgia staff didn't like him for some reason. I don't know why. Kirby Smart quickly came in, made him a priority, and they get him. Now, on to the next domino. Davis Mills then commits to Stanford, kind of the place we had expected him to go, especially since UCLA had some coaching changes there. I think he wanted to go to UCLA initially. They go ahead and get a new offensive coordinator. He goes to Texas A&M. All of a sudden, Mills, gets interest. Georgia offers. Alabama offered him as well. And I think Florida State was on the verge of offering. Instead, he commits. Stanford gets their guy. Mills, I guess, is the top of the guy on my list of the 4 Georgia quarterbacks that are ranked as 4 stars. So then the trickle down into one of your states, Jake Bentley, who we thought was high on Stanford, commits to South Carolina, and you had just went and spoke with him over the past few days.
Yeah,
Did you expect that to happen?
No, I sat across from him in his coach's office at his high school on Friday afternoon, and we were talking about South Carolina, and he told me that they were definitely the leader. That's not news to anybody. Everybody that's been following it all knew that South Carolina was kind of leading that ship. But he says, absolutely in no way am I going to commit when I'm there. I'm visiting there this week. I'm not going to commit. I'm going to come back and wait until after the spring, maybe check out Alabama, and then decide. Sure enough, he commits on the visit after he says that he will not commit on the visit. And then when I asked him, what happened, he said, I just couldn't help it. So they must have pressed pretty hard on him. But, that's where he wanted to be, and he probably saw some things that made him just go ahead and expedite the process and pull the trigger. So now him to South Carolina. Also in one of my states this week, you've got Miami taking 2 quarterbacks now. They had Nikoski Perry, who was committed there originally, broke his commitment, recommitted, and then a few days later, Cade Weldon out of the Tampa area commits to Miami. So now they're early on. I've got two quarterbacks in the fold.
Well, so it's worth noting, we touch on Bentley real quick. His dad is the running backs coach there. He grew up in South Carolina, where his dad's been a college coach and a high school coach for a long time, so I don't think that comes as a surprise. Then, but you mentioned the Miami guys. Now, the reason this has an impact is because Miami liked Bentley. Miami also liked Mills. Instead, now they go with two different guys, Perry, who's more of a dual threat, and Weldon, who is the son of Casey Weldon, the Heisman runner-up back in the day for Florida State. Were we always expecting Miami to take two in this class? Because I know they're a little short on numbers, but I was a little surprised to see both of them commit within such a short time.
I think that there were two plans of action for Miami. I think that if they would have gotten a Bentley or a Mills or somebody of that caliber, they may have only taken one. But, and I wonder how much it didn't play into the first Perry commitment. Perry commits to Miami early on, then gets some more interest and kind of suddenly decommits. I wondered if that wasn't the product of them telling him they wanted to take another quarterback. Now, I can't confirm that. I haven't asked Nikoski that. I will the next time I see him. And then maybe he came to terms with it and rejoined the fold, and then they take Weldon like 3 or 4 days later, I think. So I think it became the plan. I don't know if it was the original plan for the Hurricanes to have two in this class, but somewhere along the way the plan evolved.
Yeah, we have both of those guys ranked as 3 stars. I know I'm a little higher on Perry than you are. Actually, they're both going to be Perry will be at the Rivals camp in Atlanta on April 2nd. Weldon is expected to be at the Quarterback Challenge on April 3rd. I'm also been pushing Perry to sign up for that as well. So we're going to get another chance to look at these guys. Like I said, they're two different skill sets. Weldon, more of a pro-style guy. Perry is a guy that can do a lot of stuff with his legs. Do you think there's a possibility that maybe he moves to another position down the road, or do you think that they're going to try to break these guys up with a redshirt year? What happens with
I think Perry
position-wise?
I think Perry could move to another position if he chose to. I don't think that is something that he wants to do. I think if you tell him that, I don't think Miami has told him that. I think if Miami told him, hey, we want to look at you another position, he would not be committed to Miami right now. That's going to be something that they'll have to work on with him if that's the plan. I don't know if that's the plan. And we do call him a dual threat, but we shouldn't take anything away from Perry. The reason that he's not ranked higher right now is just because of a consistency issue. He's got a big arm. I mean, he can throw the ball a mile. He's got all these tools. It just hasn't come together for him mechanically yet. And you hope it does, because if it does, he definitely has the size and the speed and the arm strength, everything you kind of like to see. You just want to see it work out for him.
Yeah, and he's in an area in Ocala where you don't have the same type of access to QB gurus like some of these guys in Tampa, Miami, Atlanta, etc. So now that brings us to the defending national champions, Alabama. All of a sudden, the Tide left holding the bag here because number one, they've loaded up on quarterbacks in years past, and I think a lot of kids pay attention to that. They seem to take a quarterback every year, most of them pretty highly rated. And not to mention, they're also been involved in the transfer market, with them going out and getting the quarterback from Florida State, and then I think they were in the hunt for the 1AA kid who ended up at Oregon. So now what do? They've missed on Fromm, a guy they definitely wanted. They offered Mills the day after he committed to Stanford. I just don't see him changing his mind at this point. And then they missed on Bentley, and technically an in-state guy, but a guy that I just never really felt like they had a lot of traction with. So I know you talked to a friend of the podcast, Andrew Bone from TideSports.com, Snapchat legend,
Andrew
of course,
Bone, Rivals.com.
about some of the options. Between his knowledge and yours, where do they sit with some of these guys that are still on the market?
All right, well, let me start with saying that the defending national champions and Nick Saban and Alabama and that whole aura, they're never out of bounds on flipping a committed kid, right? That's something that can always happen. The three we mentioned, I don't think it's happening. Fromm flipped from Alabama. It's hard to imagine a scenario that he will flip back. Mills is headed to Stanford, where it's hard to flip kids from Stanford because of the educational opportunities and all of that. Bentley's got the family connection to South Carolina, so you can't see him really making the flip either. So they're looking at guys, like Tua Tagovailoa on the West Coast, and they're looking at Lowell Narcisse from, the Bayou area. and these kind of guys, as far as guys that they have a shot with now. Now, like I said, you never know who Alabama is going to get involved with closer to signing day. You saw it with the Ricky Town situation, and they are able to flip some highly ranked guys sometimes because they do have that mystique. But for right now, you've got to look at a guy like Tua Tagovailoa, who we both saw in L.A. From Hawaii. We both saw at the L.A. camp playing, but you got to think that's one of the targets. Him and Narcisse have got to be the top two right now.
Yeah, and he famously attends the same high school that Marcus Mariota attended. So there's a lot of people he's Hawaiian, so they're the same person, obviously. If you if you judge based on generalizations made by people, but he's about 6 feet tall, maybe 6'1", definitely more stoutly built than Mariota, and I think a guy that is just a different style of quarterback. Just
did Mariota have the Hawaiian man bun that Tagovailoa has? He's got like the start of kind of like the top ponytail thing going.
No, I believe Mariota had the real high hair, like kind of a Conan O'Brien type thing going. If you look at his Rivals profile picture from back in the day, but I personally, based on what we heard when we were out in California, unless of course Oregon offers, which they've already got their quarterback in Ryan Kelly. I expect Tua to end up at USC. They seem to be the leader in the clubhouse there for him. And I just think, boy, from Hawaii to Tuscaloosa, I don't think Delta's running any direct flights there. That would be I think that's a long way to go from home, especially for a highly ranked guy who kind of has his pick of West Coast schools.
Yeah, but with the sand beaches and the volcanoes, they're really pretty much the same, geography-wise, right?
Well, I think the cost of living is a little bit cheaper in Tuscaloosa, or Tuscaloosa, as people often refer to it when they're talking about it. So that puts us into Narcisse, who, is a guy from one of my new states down there in Louisiana. We saw him as well during our odyssey across the United States. He was kind of hit and miss. He's still coming back from a foot injury, or from a knee injury, excuse me, and then he was having some problems with his feet there in New Orleans. I think he's going to LSU. He was already committed to Auburn. He decommitted, so I think he's going to LSU. So I really think that maybe your theory.
They're going to end up with Bailey Hockman. Is that the theory?
Right. So Alabama? Bailey Hockman was committed to Georgia for a long time. When the new staff came in, they parted ways. I personally had him pegged for North Carolina for a long time. I think they're kind of the school to beat. I don't talk to Bailey a whole lot, so I don't have the greatest picture of his recruitment. But that Alabama offer. Alabama likes to offer a lot of these guys to come throw in camp. I was there a couple of years ago incognito when I decided to just to walk into the Alabama camp and see, and take a look at things. And they basically take 4 or 5 quarterbacks, pull them off onto a separate field, work them out, and film the entire thing, go back through, and then make a decision on which one they like. And when they do that, all those guys have offers. So, I think Hockman right now is in that group of the offered guys that they want to see in person. My question is, does it get to that point? Because by the time we get to the summer, I think Alabama's going to want to hopefully have one of these other guys like Tua or Narcisse or somebody in the fold, because they need a quarterback in this class. They really want one of these guys.
Yeah, no, like I said, but with Alabama, it's anybody else, I would say it's obviously they've so stacked at quarterback right now. It's never really time to hit the panic button. Anybody else, I would say, are they going to get caught holding the bag, as you said? But you just never know what they're capable of pulling off down there. When you've got the momentum that they've got on the field, nothing seems that far out of bounds, Would it shock you if they start getting involved with some other, highly rated guys down the stretch that maybe they look like they're not involved in right now?
Well, I think the guy we need to remember is Blake Barnett. He was committed to Notre Dame at this time a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's when Ricky Town, all that drama happened with him, right? It's the same.
Right. So he goes to the 5-star challenge. He just decommitted from Notre Dame, and I believe he told me, and I think he kind of told all of us, it was only a matter of time before he committed to Oregon at that point. He he ends up taking a visit to Alabama and committing on the trip. And then it was like the wheels were spinning round and round. I mean, Notre Dame ended up, I think, stealing Wimbush away from Penn State as a result of that. Oregon ended up taking Travis Waller, and it was a situation where Arizona State got Brady White. It was just round and round and round. It was all a result of Alabama going to go in and stealing a highly rated guy. So I think that's where we are probably going to end up seeing. I just don't think we know the name right now because it's yet to be determined.
Yep, no, I can completely concur.
All right, so it's been a few weeks since we've updated everyone on anything, but more importantly, Demetris Robertson, our boy, the last uncommitted five-star in the class of 2016, pushing deep into March. Looks like we are going to make it past that April 1st deadline for the National Letter of Intent. He probably will not sign that, and we'll just kind of show up wherever he decides.
I'm still really hoping he just decides to open a fish and chips shack somewhere on the beach. And it's like, yeah, well, this all get too overwhelming. Now I'm selling tilapia.
So most importantly for everyone out there, he has actually signed paperwork with 3 different schools: Georgia, California, and Georgia Tech. So right now he has 3 options on the table. I think because of the SEC rules now, he can't sign with Alabama. He could still go to Alabama, but in terms of the unlimited contact period that's available now, Georgia's got the leg up there, and then Notre Dame is still in the mix as well. I believe there's been some talk about him taking another visit to Notre Dame. He hasn't talked to anybody, I believe, since he took the visit to Georgia, but his mom was there, his sister was there, and we know his sister, is planning to run track at the same school that he goes to. So there's been all kinds of talk about that. But, Georgia fans are feeling pretty confident. I think it's big for them that he actually showed up for visit number 1 since he missed several over the past few months. But number 2, I think it should be cautiously optimistic, especially if he decides to make a trip back to Notre Dame. This has really got to be one of the most fascinating recruitments of all time, right?
What do you think the motivation is? I understand the motivation is he doesn't know where he wants to go, but how does this happen? He's visited all these schools. What is he waiting on? The test scores? He's not waiting on Stanford anymore. Does he think that? To be 17 and torn, yeah, it's tough. I understand that. But at this point, what's he going to learn about these schools that he doesn't already know?
I don't know. That's the thing is he's got to have an idea where he's going. I think he knows. I was actually going to pull up a text message right now when I spoke to his brother. Let's see what he had to say because I really wanted. I said, hey Carlos, did D-Rob sign the papers with Georgia? And he says, sure did, Woody. Oh, okay. Well, there you go. And I said, so when are we going to get this wrapped up? And he said, hard to say, Woody. Once that time approaches, you'll be the first to know, bud.
I like that he addresses you by name, which can go one of 2 ways. I remember a 5-star challenge not too long ago where who ended up in Oklahoma. I think it was Hatari Bird. Had never been on an airplane before. I know I'm kind of sidetracking this, but I'll try to wrap it up quickly. Gorney, who covers the West Coast for us, Adam Gorney, is directing Hatari Bird on how to get through the airport and get there on time. And, he's delayed and all this stuff is going wrong. And he's like, just show them your ID and your boarding pass and they'll get you on the plane. It'll be fine. And he texts back to him, I sure hope so, Adam Gorney. In the most threatening possible way.
I think the full name is threatening. The good news, my biggest takeaway is, hey, guess what, podcast listeners? I'll be the first to know. So, per this text message, I'm taking that as a binding contract. I know no recruits ever violate that promise of being the first to know.
Yeah, they're always men of their words.
We're talking to you, Jake Bentley. Trajan Bandy also. But, at least we have a little bit of an idea. He signed with those 3 schools. I think he's going to have a big ceremony. Now, I think there should be some attention paid to when and where he does it. He had talked about coming up here to Atlanta to do it. I think if he has it in Atlanta, it would definitely be an A.J. Brown-esque troll job to come to Atlanta and commit to Notre Dame over Georgia Tech and Georgia, especially considering if he does it at his home base there in Savannah, I could see it being any school. So I guess, just keep on keeping on. We'll see what happens. I'm going to try to get with Demetrius sometime over the next week and kind of touch base on a recap of what's going on. Hopefully it doesn't involve me driving down to Savannah anytime soon.
So it looks like I'm going to win the over-under, right? Like I said that this thing would drag into April, correct? And you thought it would be done?
My prediction was I think he'll have it wrapped up in April. I
think this thing's going to June, baby.
Oh man, jeez. Yeah, I really don't want it to go that long. But maybe we'll just invite him to the 5-Star Challenge again.
Yeah, let him play against the juniors, right?
Can we do that? I mean, he hasn't signed anywhere. I know we've seen senior players playing 7-on-7 that are unsigned, so I think he's technically eligible, right?
Yeah, I've always wanted to do the Rivals 100 JUCO Challenge, and nobody has ever been on that. I think that would be a blast.
Yeah, it would be a lot of fun. So let's transition on from Demetrius. We'll let you know as soon as we have an answer. And more importantly, when it's over, I may try to get D-Rob to come on this podcast so we can really go round and round with him. He was a big hit the last time he was on. Now, the school he's looking at, Georgia, all of a sudden in the news, we've seen all kinds of stuff about Kirby Smart, I believe. Shots fired by Mike Greenberg, of all people, at Kirby this morning on Mike and Mike. I saw a lot of Twitter activity surrounding it.
Wow, that's still a show?
Yeah, that's still a thing.
God.
I mean, I think it's even they got a new set and everything. I mean, I probably haven't heard an episode of Mike and Mike since 2003 or something like that. But it's still cooking, and I bet they make a lot of money doing it. But the main factor here is transfer blocks. I mean, we've seen this happen with a lot of guys. Hey, this kid wants to leave. He can leave. Fine, you can leave, but you can't go to these schools, etc. And I think he was allowed to transfer back to Florida, but he can't go to Florida or Miami, or maybe even Florida State, which basically means he can go to UCF, USF, or a couple others, and I don't think UCF has a spot for him.
Well, I understand blocking Florida. I get that. I don't understand blocking the other two. But
well, I think obviously he's blocking Miami because of the whole Mark Richt situation.
Yeah, he thinks that that's without saying that he thinks that maybe he's been tampered with, correct?
Maybe, but the guy we're talking about, the running back, DeAndre Turman, I think is his name. I'll have to look it up real fast. He's from Orlando. He hasn't played in 3 years. I mean, not at all. So it's not like we're talking about a guy. We saw Georgia have injuries at the running back position, and I mean, chances are, no matter where he goes, I don't expect him to be a guy that if he were to go to Florida, I don't think he would play very much. I think he's a mid-major guy. Maybe even A.J. Turman is the guy we're talking about. He was a 4-star coming out of high school. Jeez. Keenan Codrington, where are you at on that one? Number 235.
I'd like to just point out that I was not ranking the state at that point.
I remember him being a guy that people were really fired up that he was still ranked too low, despite even him being that high. I remember a lot of people thinking that he was a guy that was underrated. I'll have to check and see if he was ranked higher elsewhere. But
when you say a lot of people, though, I mean, it's like any player that's committed to my favorite school is underrated. So I could make this case about any player that has ever committed to any school anywhere in the country that a lot of people were telling me that he was underrated.
Well, so I know. I just wish they would say, "Hey, you know what, Rob? We were wrong. A.J. Turman was overrated, and we." Personally, thought he was better.
What I want even more is for a guy to commit to a school and for me to get an email or a tweet from somebody that's saying, I just wanted to let you know that I think this man is appropriately ranked. That's all
great. Although that'll happen with the number one player only, the number one player in the country from that school. But anyway, so he was ranked higher other places, I think is what caused the outrage. So Keenan gets a little cred. So I don't know. This is just a weird thing because he said he was denied transfer a few times. I don't know. I mean, personally, I think I'm cool with just letting guys go. I think guys should be able to go wherever they want in terms of outside of the conference or outside of your schedule. I mean, if USF was playing Georgia next season, I could see why he wouldn't want him to go there. But other than that, I mean, I personally think, coaches just need to say, hey, you want to go, go. I mean,
if I'm a coach, I've said this very, very often on this podcast, I'm always looking out for number one. It's why I don't get mad about them dropping commitments. It's why I don't get mad about, a lot of the things that some people get mad at coaches for doing. You got to get your paycheck. But so if you have to block a player from transferring in your conference because that, can mess with your paycheck, that can mess with your food, then block them. I see why you're doing it. Like, whatever, is it ideal? No, but I get the motivation. I don't understand the motivation if a kid is unhappy and wants to transfer out, blocking to a different league that isn't, unless you think that somehow you're going to play this team in the national title game or something. I don't understand how it affects anything except for just to be petty.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, if he wants to go to Georgia State, does anyone care? You know what I mean? Let him go. So I think there was some type of a revision where he can go to anywhere as long as it's not Georgia Tech, and a few programs in Florida. But I mean, I guess Kirby was kind of trying to set a tone, saying, hey, we don't want guys just jumping ship. But especially when a coaching change happens, guess what? Mark Richt can leave with no restrictions to any school he wants. Why can't Turman take off?
Yeah, no. Like I said, I concur. But, I should say that I understand him blocking SEC transfer rules. I wouldn't want a guy transferring from my team to another school in the conference.
All right, so real quick, we want to touch on more Jim Harbaugh. We had the argument this week, if you didn't see it, another shots fired tweet at the AD at Ohio State. And actually, I think people have turned on our boy Harbaugh. They weren't happy this time, saying he took the original quote out of context, blah, blah, blah. Here's my thing. Why? He's clearly just messing with it. He's really doing a Donald Trump-esque.
He was out of the headlines for like 3 weeks almost this time. So he had to get back in there, and this is a good way to do it.
Okay, so people say, what do recruits though? This isn't how a coach should act. This isn't classy or whatever. Guess what? Take it from me, someone who is not classy in any way, shape, or form, especially on social media. Recruits love it. When I make fun of someone on Twitter, the amount of messages I get unsolicited from recruits goes through the roof. I mean, multiple DMs, multiple texts from people thinking it's hilarious. So recruits pay attention to this. There's no doubt about it, and they like it. Guess what? They like it. They like that Jim Harbaugh's a Twitter savage.
When did we decide that football coaches had to be classy? I mean, these are dudes that have limited vocabularies for the most part and chew tobacco and cuss at people. I mean, it's not a wine and cheese party at a football coaches convention. People want – I don't understand. People want – fan bases want other football coaches of other schools to be classy, but it's funny when their coach does it. You don't have to be classy if you coach for my favorite school, but if you coach for one of my rivals, by God, this is a wine and cheese party.
I don't think fans realize, because when they see the coaches talk, they're buttoned up and they are acting, classy, like you said. I mean, there are a lot of coaches chew tobacco out on the field. A lot of them use some language that wouldn't be appropriate for this podcast. I mean, we've seen it when you watch, even, I was watching the Gonzaga basketball show, which is like a Hard Knocks type thing. And that's, some type of a school there where, bad language is not encouraged, and the coaches are dropping F-bombs left and right,
College football coaching is not like a book club discussing the 19th century classics here. I don't understand when this expectation that everybody needs to behave like a like a schoolboy became a thing.
Well, our national recruiting director, Mike Farrell, affectionately known as Mike Farrell on this podcast, wrote in his 3-point stance column today that he loves it and thinks it's so great. Guess what? Then I don't want to see any more complaints about my Twitter goings on, right? If I'm doing the same thing as Harbaugh, why do I get in trouble every time if we're encouraging the coach to do it? This is a question for you, Rob.
Because recruiting reporting is a buttoned-up discussion of classic literature, but football coaching is not.
Mm.
Yes.
I know our bosses listen to this, so I'm just following the lead of one of the most successful coaches in the country, Jim Harbaugh. So I'm going to use that as my defense when I get sent to HR the next time.
It's not a bad strategy.
All right. Now, Rob, we're going to take a step away from you real quick, and we're going to head out.
You're gonna head out
west.
to Texas country. We should introduce KROOG, shouldn't we? Like, have we told people that we have this new segment?
I believe we haven't. We know that Nick, our producer, is now the Texas analyst. So each week we're going to get with Nick, either Rob or I, or the three of us all together for a little Texas roundup. So
and we will wear cowboy hats.
Yeah, we will be wearing cowboy hats. My dad famously wore rattleskin snake boots often to formal affairs. So I got a little bit of whatever in me. So. I'll try to spice that up.
Got a little bit of Whataburger in me.
Right, exactly. Yeah, Diet Dr. Pepper. Here I come. So now you can listen to me and Nick. We will talk about the biggest topics in Texas, and then Rob and I will be back with Rants and Recommendations. Now it's time for a new segment on the Commitment Issues podcast. We like to call it Nick's Texas Roundup. Nick Kruger, our loyal producer, now also an analyst here at Rivals.com. How excited are you to get your own segment as part of the show?
I'm very excited. I think I'm very deserving. For a long time, I've been working harder than anybody else at this company, so it's finally time for me to get my due.
There you go. He said you heard it here first. So listen, let's talk about this past weekend. We had the Dallas camp on Saturday and the quarterback challenge on Sunday. I know weather was a little bit of a concern out there, but what was kind of your biggest takeaways having a chance to really lay your eyes on these Texas guys for the first time?
It's tough for me because my introduction into Texas is I'm still getting familiar with, all the guys out there and comparing them to one another and, making sure that I have a good feel on who's actually good and who I just think might be good from seeing their highlight film from before getting out there. But I mean, boy, when you see these guys up close and in person, there's a lot to like. And obviously the number one player in the country out there, Marvin Wilson, came out to our camp and was really impressive. And, when he sort of sets the bar and you can kind of see the trickle down of talent from there, there was a lot of fun football to watch out there that weekend.
So you didn't get a chance to come out to Los Angeles with us, but I think we were all really impressed with Trevon Grimes down in Florida. Now, out in L.A., we had a chance to see Najee Harris, who's very impressive. Those are the top three players in the country. After what you saw from Wilson, and you compare him to Grimes, do you feel like Wilson is still that guy? I mean, you feel like he's still going to be the number one player?
Well, what we saw in Grimes in Florida and the way that he dominated a receiver, I mean, was just the same as the way Marvin Wilson dominated on the defensive line, here in Dallas this past weekend. Really, the only player that was able to slow Wilson down was his own teammate in Walker Little, and that happened in the second session of the offensive line and defensive line one-on-ones. So it was really interesting that both those guys, coming from a relatively small school, going back and forth with each other, one being the top player in the country, and and his own teammate being able to be the one to kind of slow him down a little bit was interesting. But other than that, Wilson, I mean, was very dominant. Had the speed and power that you would see in his highlight film. Definitely translated to real life. Very quick. And powerful player. He was really impressive, and I think for both of those guys to be top three players in the country, I mean, if we're comparing them against one another, that's they're sitting where they should be.
All right, so there'll definitely be a discussion about that. There's been a lot of discussion about Wilson's recruitment. Now, you did a file earlier this week where you were asked to predict where a lot of the guys at the camp would land. I noticed a lot of guys, first of all, landing in the SEC based on your predictions. And number two, with Wilson, you had him being one of those guys going to LSU. Now, it seems to be that people don't really have a great read. What was it about LSU that kind of made them be the pick for you?
Well, people are going to accuse me, I think, right off the bat of having SEC bias, considering I've been living in Atlanta with you for some time. But, I think when you take a look at Wilson specifically, the biggest reason I picked him to go to LSU is because prior to these camps, we also had to do another predictions piece where I picked Wilson going to LSU, and I wasn't about to flip flop within the span of a week on my own prediction there. But I think scheme wise, when you look at Wilson's skill set and what he can do anywhere on the defensive line, I think he would be an exciting watch if he went to LSU, and if he ends up feeling that way, that's sort of what I would be thinking if I was him. But talking to him before the camp and listening to his interview and watching the way that he talked about Alabama, they're definitely a team that I think is heavily in the running for him as well. So yeah, I know those are still two SEC teams, but based on what he said recently in interviews and just from what I think of him as a player, I still think LSU is probably the best fit for him.
All right, so we'll be sure to clip this tape and play it back. If you're wrong down the line, you'll have to producer yourself and, and own up to your incorrect prediction. Now we'll talk a little bit about Texas A&M making news today. Today, of course, is Thursday. You'll probably hear this on Friday or over the weekend. The big news in the college football recruiting world. I even saw some esteemed reporters actually say, "I don't talk about recruiting," but Tate Martell, the top quarterback, prospect, one of the top dual threat quarterbacks in the country, is at Ohio State visiting and actually posted on Twitter just a few minutes ago. We saw him in a jersey, the whole unofficial visit experience. The question is, if you're a Texas A&M fan, are you freaking out? What's going on with Tate making that trip?
My personal opinion of that kind of from afar is that I wouldn't be worried if I was a Texas A&M fan. Tate's been, you want to talk about his presence on Twitter. I mean, there's not very much, there's not too many more options for a divisive figure on Twitter in the football recruiting, in today's football recruiting landscape than our boy Tate. He really stirs the pot, but consistently is always pounding the drum for Texas A&M. Very vocal about, who he wants to recruit and get out there. You see him constantly posting Aggie photos on other people's Twitter feeds, campaigning for them, to be out there. And obviously with all the stuff going on with the Texas versus Nevada argument ahead of his game opening up the season at Cedar Hill in Texas with Bishop Gorman. He's really entrenched in the Texas culture already, and I think he likes it. And he was very insistent that he respects the players in Texas. And I think he's still a firm commit to A&M.
Yeah, a lot of his teammates are there. I think some of his high school teammates / 7-on-7 teammates are there. Tyjon Lindsey being one of them, a guy I was really impressed with out in California. But it's interesting when Tate landed, he tweeted, "Just landed in Columbus, Ohio." That was one line. Next line, "Unofficial visit to Ohio State tomorrow." And then one more line, "Follow me on Snapchat to keep up with my visit."
Oh, I know. So, I saw that too. Isn't that great? And I mean, do we obviously it's probably against the rules, but I mean, we're getting to the point. I've seen several pay for Snapchat accounts, and we might be rode right out of the business by these recruits going into business for themselves, doing things like this and charging for it at some point.
Well, we know Bryce Brown tried to do his own thing where he charged, I think, $10 a month to get recruiting updates just on him. This was a long time ago when he was one of the top players in the country. But I think the NCAA said you're not allowed to do that. So I don't know if they're going to be able to rein in Snapchat though. So you might have an actually a pretty good idea. So you say
there's going to be a lot of PayPal audits in the near future for some of these kids,
Right. Yeah. You say don't worry. I'm a little nervous if I'm a Texas A&M fan with the way quarterback recruiting's been going for them, the way things have kind of been a little unstable, and the way Ohio State's done a good job. They stole a quarterback just this last time, and they didn't steal until the end in Dwayne Haskins. And we know they were scrambling for a guy for a while. So I would keep an eye on it. I would also keep an eye, does Texas A&M offer another quarterback? They've offered 4 guys by our count. We discussed it prior to coming on here. Ryan Kelly, who's committed to Oregon, Sean Robinson, who's been committed to TCU forever, and Kellen Mond, who's committed to Baylor. So I don't really see any of those guys flipping, especially to be a second guy. But if I'm Texas A&M, I think you want to get another quarterback in the fold just because, and regardless of what Martell does, just because we've seen a lot of turnover there at the position, and they need to kind of make sure they have options, especially in an offense where the quarterback is asked to run a little bit. So,
well, if I could just add one more thing about that, I mean, for what it's worth, there's been a number of guys out here in Texas I've already talked to about A&M. A lot of kids have been going to visits there recently, and I don't want to. I don't want people to get the wrong idea about me, but I do occasionally bring up, what their kind of feel was on the situation that may have led to two quarterbacks transferring out of there, if they felt there was anything going on with the coaches, any sort of vibe that they got from them. Every single kid has a very positive reaction towards all the coaches on the A&M staff right now. So I think, maybe that ship has sailed, and if Tate can hang in there and stay the course with A&M, I think, that might be a figment of people's memories here in the near future.
All right, so I think that wraps up our first Texas Roundup. If you want to hear more from Nick, if you have any specific questions for him, you can find him on Twitter at RivalsKROOG City. Of course, you can email us at Rivals Podcast. Nick, you're over 1,000 followers, I noticed, and climbing, huh?
That's right. Yeah, well, I've gotten a nice bump from all the kids that I need to be interviewing constantly on social media and things of that nature.
Well, the question is, can you catch our boy Cassidy Robb? You're at 1,126. We need to get that number up, people, so follow Nick on Twitter. Rob, though, I believe is close to 10K, but we've seen crazier things. When I started as an analyst, there were 6 other people who had more followers than me, and now they're all looking at my license plate. I'm like Paul George. I don't have a rearview mirror in my car, so I can't even tell you. I can't even tell you how many followers they have. Once I go by, that's it.
I'm still on a bicycle in the bike lane, so but I'm getting there.
All right. Thanks a lot, Nick, and we'll talk to you again next week.
All right, now back from Texas to the more cosmopolitan and progressive part of the show. Rants and recommendations, correct? I mean, this is as highbrow as we get, Woody. What do you got for us this
people
week?
love listening to me complain. It's way better. I could do a whole segment of just complaining about Texas after I had to spend a week there earlier this year, but since we're trying to bring our listeners into Texas and show some love for the Lone Star State, we'll save that for a future episode. In terms of rants and recommendations, I had so many complaints, I almost couldn't sort through them. So, we'll start with one. I went to a wedding over the weekend. Big shout to my sister-in-law, Alicia, on her nuptials. And, there was a litany of wedding issues, Rob. As someone who goes to weddings and events like that sober at all times, I got my eye on the prize.
Sure.
And, I want to loop you in here, too, because it seems like you're in a wedding every other weekend.
It's a product of the fraternity life.
When you are a groomsman, do you feel some type of pressure, especially being a former fraternity man, to be out there on the dance floor and keeping things going, right? Don't you feel like it's on you to keep the party going?
Yeah, it's definitely part of the task, I think. We have it pretty easy as far as guys are concerned in wedding parties, as compared to what the women have. The women just kind of basically become, glorified peasants. They have a lot of work to do and a lot of things to do for the bride. Whereas our only jobs really for the groom are to not lose the rings, and to keep the party going. So yeah, I definitely do feel a certain sense of responsibility.
So that's my message. I'm not saying that my new brother-in-law's groomsmen did a bad job, but it was a lot of pressure on me to be out there on the dance floor, Rob, and I think we've all seen what I'm capable of. Obviously, I was up to the task. But if you're in a wedding, you got to make sure the entire wedding party's having fun. That means mixing in. That means if you're single, that means flirting with other single girls that are there, even if they're not super attractive or you're not attracted to them. Just have a good time. That's your job. Like Rob said, the bridesmaids, They're out, making floral arrangements. They're helping get stuff ready. They're helping the bride all day long.
Man,
all you're
it's
doing
just a bad situation for them, man. They get hammered by that bride. It's
right, yeah, the bride is on them all the time. So if you as a groomsman, or if you're in a wedding, and especially, the best man gives a speech, okay, he does some things. The rest of you guys, make sure people are having fun. You're basically, you and I have both been to a lot of big-time, parties around Super Bowls and stuff like that. And guess what the Super Bowl people do? They bus in models to hang around and have a good time and make it look like it's a better party than it is. That's your job at a wedding, groomsman. So it's on you. That's my mini rant. I could go more in depth, but I like sleeping in my own bed, so I won't go too far. I won't go too far down the road.
Let me ask you this: what's your take on the whole dollar dance thing? Is that a thing that happens?
No, that's not a thing that happens at anything I go to. I've seen little trees where you tie $1 to it or whatever, but yeah, I mean, obviously I end up going to some Greek weddings and whatnot, but yeah, there's no dollar dance. I mean, I'm already spending money to get to the wedding, and I'm giving you a gift, which is most likely just a check. Now I got to find cash too.
Yeah,
right?
I think it's tacky. I was going to take that side, but yeah, if you don't experience it, then you're going to much more highbrow weddings than I am.
Well, yeah, obviously with me being...
It's actually okay probably for people right out of college, but, I think we're at the age right now where we got to knock that off.
No. Don't ask for money. People are going to give you money already. You're having a wedding. What do you need $1? What's $1 going? What do you do with these dollars? How many dollars does one person get if they're on these dances?
It got me.
Anyway, so that's that. That's my rant. You have a rant, Rob?
No, no. I don't think I do, except for the fact that I made a terrible choice in Los Angeles by staying thousands of miles away from the camp. I don't know how that happened. It possibly left my podcast microphone there, so that's a problem as well.
Yeah, we were all over the place in LA. At the hotel situation was less than good, especially considering we had all kinds of issues with but their rooms were booked up. There's not many hotels by the camp anyway, so we were all over the place. I do have a recommendation. I think I've talked about it on the podcast before. I don't know if I've officially recommended it in this section. That's Tsa Precheck. Speaking of L.A., we dealt with a lot of traffic out there. I think it took me 2.5 hours to go 20 miles on Friday afternoon when I landed in L.A. On Monday morning, on the way to the airport, I got stuck in traffic again. I pulled into the airport to drop off my rental car at 7:20 a.m. My flight started boarding at 7:48, and I was standing at the gate at 6:36 or at 7:36. I mean, 12 minutes ahead of time. It took me 16 minutes to drop off my car, drop off my bag, and go through security. And that's all due to Tsa Precheck. Anyone could sign up for it. You go do a background check at the airport. You pay $85 for 5 years. I mean, think about, time is money. I'm always telling you that. I always cut it close to the airport as is. If you spend that money, you fly right through. Even if you fly 3 times a year and you save an hour of time, you got to figure it's worth,
Oh man, I've got the hotel. Oh man, I've got the hotel calling me about the lost podcast microphone. Should I take it on the air?
Well, no one's going to be able to hear what they say. No one's going to be able to hear them, unfortunately.
Yeah, I got it spill over.
All right, you got a recommendation or no?
Nothing really new. I haven't had time with all the traveling. I continue to watch the CW's Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which I think is a tremendously smart television show with a terrible name. I think that name scares people off because it's such kind of like a misogynistic, weird title for a show. But if you actually get into it, it kind of rebels against those topics, I think. And it's real smart. It's real funny. I would recommend watching it.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of heteronormative stereotypes being played out just based on the title.
Nah, see, but they're being raged against. See, they really did a poor job naming that television show. But other than that, if you can get past the title, it really is quite enjoyable.
All right, so that wraps it up for us. We will be back next week. I think, Rob, you're actually coming up here to Atlanta at some point, so I'm not sure if we can get 2 episodes out over the next 10 days or so. We might be able to. Nick is also going to be here in Atlanta prior to his move to Texas. You can follow all of us on Twitter. Rob is at Cassidy_Rob. I'm at Rivals Woody. Nick is at Rivals KROOG City. That's KROOG. and he is an OG, so it really.
Man, I'm so excited for Nick and I to make you watch WrestleMania with us on Sunday night in Atlanta. We got to find a bar to do that at.
Yeah, maybe we should do a special WrestleMania podcast where I complain the whole time. Well, I'm not really looking. That WrestleMania maybe eat into the time where we would be recording this podcast, actually. So, a big shout to M. Deuce. We haven't heard from him in a while. He's back better than ever. He's got some new tracks on SoundCloud. You can find him there, M-Deuce. And we'll be back with another episode next week.